Good day, viewers. It is my pleasure to have you on Beyond the Headlines. Thousands of Mozambicans took to the streets of Maputo, the capital city, on Thursday, November 7th, to protest the result of the recent election, which they believe was rigged. The situation quickly escalated as security forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the crowd. This latest development is part of the ongoing post-election unrest that has gripped the southern African country for weeks. The protests are a response to the election outcome, which saw Daniel Chapo of the ruling FRELIMO party, declared winner with 70.67% of the vote. However, the opposition candidate Venâncio Mondlane has disputed the results, claiming he won with 53% of the vote based on his party's parallel count. Meanwhile, South Africa has briefly reopened its border with Mozambique on Thursday, only to reclose it hours, as violent post-election protests in Mozambique intensified, resulting in clashes between demonstrators and law enforcement. Initially, the border was shut down earlier the week due to safety concerns. However, in a temporary reprieve, authorities partially reopened the crossing on Thursday to clear a backlog of stranded trucks and vehicles. Unfortunately, the respite was short-lived and the border was promptly reclosed in response to escalating tensions. Tensions are running high in Maputo, with social media and internet access cut off, making it difficult for information to circulate. Reports indicate that the government is targeting citizens, arresting them one by one. The violence suppression has claimed the lives of over 20 people, with more than 100 wounded, according to reports from the civil society organizations and international observers like Amnesty International. Despite the challenges, Mozambicans remain resilient and adamant that their freedom is worth fighting for.
Our call to the Mozambican authorities has been that they need to respect people's right to freedom of assembly. The police need to refrain from using excessive and unnecessary force against peaceful protesters. They need to keep the internet on so people can communicate, and they need to immediately and unconditionally release all those that have been arbitrarily arrested. But more importantly, neighboring countries and international institutions like SADC and the African Union need to speak forcefully about the human rights situation in Mozambique. So as you said, Dan, over the past 3 weeks, people have been protesting, expressing their dissatisfaction with the results of the elections and expressing concern about police brutality and vote rigging. Police have then responded with a very serious crackdown, one that we haven't seen in many years in Mozambique. Instead of police facilitating assemblies and keeping people safe as they protest, they have been shooting at them indiscriminately and using violence to disperse these peaceful assemblies. We've seen, for example, police yesterday, for example, shooting at people who were kneeling, protesters who were kneeling with their hands up, and they were shooting rubber bullets directly at these people. We've seen police throwing tear gas canisters into people's homes where people have chosen to protest peacefully from their homes through, for example, making noise with pots and pans. We've seen police deploying, or the authorities deploying military tactics and just sending a very chilling message to anybody who decides they want to peacefully assemble and express themselves about the protest.
Now, to expatiate on the root of this mass demonstration, Mozambique's Front for the Liberation of Mozambique, otherwise known as FRELIMO party, has held a tight grip on power since the country gained independence from Portugal in 1975, but this nearly 5-decade rule has been marred by controversy, violence, and opposition. The party's dominance has been challenged by RENAMO, a rebel group turned opposition party, which has accused FRELIMO of election fraud and authoritarianism. FRELIMO's journey began as a liberation movement fighting for Mozambique's independence. After achieving freedom, the party transitioned into governance with Samora Machel as its first president. Machel's rule was marked by socialist policies and a centralized government supported by the Soviet Union and Cuba. However, this move sparked stiff opposition from the capitalist-oriented rebel organization, the Mozambican National Resistance. that is the FRELIMO, that was backed by the United States and South Africa. In the event that followed between 1977 and 1992, the country went through one of the scariest civil wars in Africa's history, in which at least 1 million people perished and thousands more displaced. Since 1975, the FRELIMO-controlled government has had 3 presidents through popular multi-party elections. Joaquim Chissano, who ruled from 1994 to 2005, Armando Guebuza, who ruled from 2005 to 2015, and then the current president, Filipe Nyusi, whose administration is to end in 2024. On October 9, the country held a highly controversial election. But before I proceed to the issues in the election, it is important that you know how powerful the office of the president in Mozambique is. The Constitution of Mozambique outlines that the President of the Republic functions as the head of state, the head of government, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, as well as the symbol of national unity. The President is directly elected for a 5-year term and can only be re-elected once through a runoff voting. If no candidate receives more than half of the votes cast in the first round of voting, a second round of voting will be held, in which only the 2 candidates who received the highest number of votes in the first round will participate, and whichever the candidate obtains a majority of votes in the second round will thus be elected president. Now, what are the issues in the 2024 elections? Daniel Chapo, the candidate of Mozambique's ruling party, FRELIMO, was declared the winner of the presidential election on October 24, but the victory was met with controversy. Opposition parties cried foul even before the results were announced, accusing FRELIMO of ballot stuffing, voter list manipulation, and packing polling stations with loyal officials. The party has long been accused of manipulating elections in the country of over 30 million people. The opposition's concerns were echoed by international observers who noted irregularities during counting and alterations of election results at polling stations and district levels. The European Union observers reported instances of voter intimidation, voter buying, inflated vote rolls in FRELIMO strongholds. Domestic monitors also raised concerns about discrepancies in the total number of registered voters.
I'm Mozambican. I voted, and I know who I voted, and I know much people here in Mozambique voted too. So we came here to protest our vote. There are a lot of things here in Mozambique that not running well, but we had so much patience from the beginning. We are making now 50 years, you know, nothing changed. So today we decide to come out, everyone, to protest our vote and say no more FRELIMO party.
The anxiety around the election was further heightened when 2 senior opposition figures were brutally gunned down in a late-night shooting. The victims, one a lawyer for the independent candidate, Venâncio Mondlane, and the other, a spokesperson for Mondlane's supporting party, PODEMOS, were assassinated, sparking outrage and fear. Mondlane, who came second in the disputed election, had called for a national strike and protest, alleging widespread tampering. But the killings silenced the streets, replacing anger with anxiety. The opposition's cries of corruption echoed through the nation as Mondlane and supporters gathered near the crime scene demanding justice. The shootings, timing, and targets fueled suspicions of a sinister plot to suppress dissent voices. Subsequently, the opposition candidate, Mondlane, fled the country in fear for his life after his lawyer was killed. Despite his exile, Mondlane continues to call for the protest on social media, urging citizens to break free from the shackles which have held them for 50 years. However, the authorities have taken a hardline stance, labeling the protests as violent and necessary to quell. Unfortunately, they have not released any information on the number of casualties or injuries.
I think 1 month after the voting day, which took place on 9th of October, the opposition candidate Venâncio Mondlane has called for a wave of protests in Mozambique. So he said that the protest will take place in 4 stages. 3 stages have passed. The last one took, it was really hard because there had been many confrontations, particularly in Maputo, between security forces and protests. The opposition candidate had called for more than 1 million people to protest in Maputo. Obviously, we didn't have that number, but it was there was many people protesting on the 7th of November in Maputo, and security forces were there to prevent any sort of protests. The situation right now is that the protests have stopped. The opposition candidate Venâncio Mondlane said that on next Monday he will announce new wave of protests. We don't know exactly what form of the protest will take place because he acknowledged that the brutality of police in trying to repress the protests. So Venâncio Mondlane announced that new forms of protest will take place and will have huge impact on the economy of Mozambique. He said he asked Mozambican people to prepare themselves in the next 3 days until Monday for the new measures. So right now, we are also expecting to hear the High Court, which we call Constitutional Council, to validate the elections. It's not yet clear when the Constitutional Council will validate the elections and announce the final results. We are expecting that this will take place on the 24th of November. The problem right now is that the Constitutional Council have to analyze two processes. First, all the appeals by opposition parties, mainly in regard to frauds and irregularities. And then after analyzes all this process, then the Constitutional Council will have to move to the second step, which is to validate the election. Well, this process is very complicated right now. Why? Because the results that have been passed from the National Election Commission to the Constitutional Council have so many discrepancies.
Meanwhile, the incoming president, Daniel Chapo, will indeed face significant challenges, particularly from the terrorist group Ansar al-Sunnah, which has been wreaking havoc in the country since 2017. The extremist group seeks to establish an Islamic State in the region and has been responsible for numerous terrorist attacks targeting civilians, security forces, and then the infrastructure. Mozambique's struggles extend far beyond this tumultuous political landscape. The country is beset by profound development challenges, including widespread unemployment and persistent hunger. According to the United Nations World Food Programme, a staggering 1.3 million people are struggling to access basic sustenance, grappling with severe food shortages. As Mozambique's streets resound with protests, citizens demand change and an end to violence and oppression. The nation's future hangs in the balance, and as its people fight for democracy, equality, and justice, will their voices be heard? Well, only time will tell.